to welcome everybody once again to our webinar. And you are watching our webinar on the impact of technology on learning, presented to you by JST and Agora. My name is Elle, and I'm the Vice President of the Asia Pacific Assistive Robotics Association. And now let's proceed to the part where we hear from the experts who are joining us this afternoon. And I'd like to call on our virtual stage our very first speaker, Mr. Oliver Tien, Director of Oliver Tien Associates in Singapore. Oliver is the Honorary Council Advisor of Agora. He is also the Strategic Advisor to several startup companies and regional NGOs. He believes that humans must be the masters of technology. So let's hear from Oliver as he talks about technologically driven learning models. Welcome, Oliver.
Thank you very much, Elle. Thanks, Abby. It's a great pleasure to be here again to talk to this audience. In fact, this is a topic that's very dear to my heart. How is technology driving the learning models as we move forward? Clearly, in the last 9 months or so, AI has picked up a lot of momentum and certainly has impacted many industries. The education industry is clearly one of them. There's a lot of concerns, perhaps interest, enthusiasm, and you name it, right? It's definitely impacting the way we learn. The fundamental questions that we should ask ourselves, and this is how I'm going to start my presentation here, is to look at learning and what do we want to achieve with learning. Really, learning wants us to explore different information, different knowledge, and let us find out more. And as we do that, we need to engage with people, with content, and more importantly, we want to know how to collaborate with different parties to learn from each other, and more importantly, encourage each of us to move forward with all those contents. But as we start to look at the way we engage and learn together, there's also important things that we need to look at, and that is in each of these aspects of exploration, engagement, elaboration of content, we build upon ourselves different information, right? First of all, in the different culture and environment that we have, we adopt different contexts of learning. We take different action and perspective on how we engage. The experiences, the motivation we go through in terms of how we elaborate on the content and learn better, builds upon the whole learning process. And learning has, from the beginning of time, gave us the opportunity to be able to discover new information. And technology today has become a very critical part of how it actually involves us in the learning process. And this is where we want to talk about how technology itself has transformed education. Education industry has been one of the longest industry that has been very little affected by education, by technology. I remember back in the year 2000, I drove an initiative called e-learning 2000, where we talk about how technology can be deployed to transform paper-based content to e-learning content so that we can learn a lot better. But fast forward 23 years, we're seeing a lot more better way of dealing with all this. What is important is that I'd like to draw your attention to a paper that was published in June 2021, the Roadmap to 2023 Technology-Enabled Teaching and Learning at Scale. Now, this is a very important message because what we are clearly saying is that there are perhaps an important perspective for us to understand how technology is enabling the way we teach and the way we learn. So in this particular publication itself, the authors draw a nice, interesting continuum of if we were to look at education from a vision perspective and drive that towards how content could be delivered, we move from that vision to securing or gathering expertise, and then understanding what are the various technology that can be provided to drive content. Whereas on the other hand, if the whole learning process is technologically driven, then you look at the whole perspective from the angle of the infrastructure that is needed to support the learning process before coming towards achieving your learning vision. So the key message here is, what does that mean, right? Which is the better perspective? How do we drive the whole learning goal, whether it's from the vision to the content or from the content infrastructure to the vision itself? So this was delivered in the year 2021. Fast forward 2 years, I guess we're seeing a lot more new developments that we're suggesting. So this is a recent paper that was published in the US by the Office of Educational Technology. It looked at AI, in particular AI, and how it's affecting the future of learning, teaching and learning. This is just a very new paper, and I encourage all of you to spend some time reading this, published in May 2023. I think one of the key messages that I like to bring to your attention is this particular quote that was given by Dr. Marcelo Aaron, where he says that we need to know how to use AI to study the diversity, the multiplicity of effective learning approaches, and think about how various models can help us eventually to get a broader understanding of what effective and meaningful engagement might look like across different contexts. That's quite a mouthful, but it tells us that in order to leverage technology to do what we are doing, to learn better, we need to fully appreciate this technology. And there's so much today. ChatGPT, generative AI is playing a big role in supporting us in terms of the future of learning. Now here I draw you another page that's out of that particular document itself that try to explain, right, what the familiar approaches to using technology in learning is like and what the future technology is going to be like. Now this is a very interesting table because when you look at the three components of input, process, and output, right? Traditionally, we type a lot of contents, we do a clicking, we do a lot of touching and gesturing. But in the future, we're probably going to see this appear in terms of us being able to speak to a software, draw a diagram, and the software is able to pick up that drawing and interpret it and then respond accordingly. So if you compare the two columns, what we're definitely seeing is that there is a whole shift in terms of how technology is going to affect the way we learn, and how teachers probably have to spend time designing curriculum to support how they want to teach content. Now, AI is a big thing, and AI has been there now to kind of step into the domain of learning. And some of the questions that we may all ask would be as follows, right? How is AI and technology improving the quality of teachers' days' work, right? So we're not talking about just simply purely delivering content, but an educator, a teacher's daily work. What does technology do to affect them? We should also see that at the end of the day, with proper AI and technology, we should be able to reduce the burden, the teaching burden of teachers, and let technology play a part in helping the child learn better. Question is, do we use AI in the classroom? Do you use it outside the classroom? What sort of model are you looking at? Clearly, besides the hybrid model, there's a whole discussion around a high flex model, a hybrid and flexible model that allows learner to be effective to go beyond the standard curriculum. And of course, teachers need to have proper oversight of how AI or technology is used to support the learners. And this is a very important message, very, very important approach, because at the end of the day, there is the whole aspects of different learners having different approaches, different personalized style of learning, and how can technology adapt to the different personalized learning models so that they can be all very effective. Now, having said all that, right, what we hope to see, right, and the report actually suggests that technology, particularly AI, needs to be able to introduce new forms of interaction between teachers and students, and probably, if I extend it further, between students and parents themselves, because parents can play an important part to support the whole process. How can AI actually provide more information to parents in terms of the learning journey that the child is going through and support them? AI should also help educators with the variability of the learning process, right? AI should be a very powerful form of adapting different learning methods, different learning styles as we start to understand the weaknesses of the child, the strength of the child, and the needs that the child will need to go through, right? And very importantly, providing the feedback loop so that teachers, educators can understand the needs of the learner and support the learner accordingly. Of course, finally, technology should support the educator. So these are some of the 5 key components, key areas where we believe technology will transform the whole learning process. Excuse me. Now, why AI? So this is a very interesting study that was done by IoT Analytics, right? And when the survey looked at some of the top CEOs, we realized that in Q3 of 2023 itself, right, versus Q2 of 2023, right, there are a lot more discussion on the adoption of AI technology. Industry 4.0 kind of have been kept down into a little corner, less talked about, but really, how is the AI building up? What are the AI chips available? Use of generative AI, ChatGPT, sustainability, and so on and so forth. So AI becomes a main topic in many of this discussion. Clearly, education must also explore what does it mean in the adoption of AI technology. I love to share this picture, right? This is a picture that was produced by this writer, Maria Diaz, right? And here she showed two picture, right? The top left-hand corner, which is a smaller picture, and then the main picture, which is slightly brighter. The question I asked myself and the question I asked the audience, which one do you think is the real photograph? Which one do you think is generated by AI system? Well, to no one's surprise, right? The big picture, which is clearer, sharper, and well-positioned, was generated by the AI system. So what the author did, what Maria did, was just simply scan in the image of the photograph that was shown on the top right-hand corner and provide some little codes and commands, right, to the AI system. And Midjourney actually produces this picture for her. Isn't it very powerful? Can you think of the fact that if our children is able to use AI technology, is able to use technology to help them with the learning process, the creation of what they want to produce can be quite amazing. Now, that brings us to the fact that it's very important for us to understand prompt engineering, to be able to prompt the right questions to get answers that we want. I know many of us are using ChatGPT or Google Bard, but realistically, many of us are good at asking binary questions. Is this or is that? You know, yes or no answer. You know, a bad prompt would be write me a story. That doesn't say anything. But if you improve on it and say, write me a story that's set in a small town where a stranger comes to town, blah, 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 the context that you're putting it in allows the system to actually generate a more powerful story for you. And of course, in the better prompt that's suggested at the bottom half, right, is you provide sufficient content, sufficient guidance and parameters for the learner, for the system to generate information in order for you to get the right answer you want. Now, what this means is that we probably need our learner to be a lot more shrewd and sharp in terms of how they're going to ask questions, because by asking the right question with the sufficient parameters provided, then they will be able to get the answers that they want. So it's no longer just content reproduction, right? Remembering what is in the repository, in the books, or in the library, and producing onto paper, right? It is really knowing how to ask the question. And that's a very important skill that, you know, we will have to pick up. And with the impact of technology, learners need to know how to prompt a question and ask the right question to get things going. Now, the impact of technology on learning will affect many, many different areas. And in this short 15 minutes, it's probably difficult to cover every single aspect of it. Content management to how we can use tools to be productive and communicate effectively, to how we can actually virtually span learning across geography, across time, and so on and so forth. So this is a chart that shares the multiple different aspects of how technology can enable learning in a much more effective way. I won't go into a lot of the details, but to share with you that the fact is technology will transform education in many ways, and it's coming. It's definitely coming your way. I want to bring attention to this model, the SAMR model, and I know that my colleague later will also talk about the SAMR model. there are different ways of looking at how technology is going to affect learning. Is it as an enhancement, or eventually will it transform the way we learn, right? At the basic level, it is a substitute for content, it is a substitute for function or delivery. At the basic level, perhaps the next level, it's an augmentation of what it does. But more importantly, we'll definitely see technology as a modification of how a task can be designed, a learning task can be designed or redesigned to be more effective in the delivery process. And it also allows the creation of new tasks and new processes, which in the past, right, would be inconceivable. So that's what we'll see happen, right? The M&R, modification and redefinition of learning, taking a bigger role with the impact of technology. What we see slowly and surely will be eventually the arrival of self-directed learning. And self-directed learning is going to be a very important piece, right? To give the learner the freedom to explore, to discover, to build upon their curiosity, to eventually be able to satisfy what he wants to find. In fact, earlier this year, I presented a paper in San Francisco around just-in-time learning versus just-in-case learning. Today, many of times when we do presentation and when we do learning, clearly we learn just in case we need to know the knowledge in time to come. And with technology moving so fast, right? By the time you finish school or after you've graduated, you find that what you have learned may have been outdated because technology is just changing every 9 months, right? So we need to figure a way to understand, to self-direct ourselves, to learn just in time so that we can effectively use new knowledge in our problem solving at our daily lives and to be effective in the way we do our things. I just want to kind of share this 6C of learning, which is very important. We should always think about this, right? Critical thinking is one of them. Being able to communicate effectively, clearly is another. Now, not many of us have the ability to articulate what we want to say. Collaboration, being able to exchange ideas between various parties, embracing culture into our whole learning process. We clearly know that between the different cultures, there are different learning methods, different style, different environment, and how to embrace all that into our learning process. Creativity, being able to take content, extrapolate the content, and then be able to create new content is probably one of the powerful aspects of learning. And finally, being able to leverage connectivity, how to get connected to different places, right? So what is important at the end of the day is to have the incentive to learn. And I know all of us are really motivated to learn, but technology should help us how to learn. How to learn becomes a very important and critical piece of the whole learning process. So adapting AI into a learning process has become key, right? We need to know what we want to achieve. We need to have real-time feedback to source information and gather our learning outcome, and eventually to adapt our learning accordingly to achieve the whole learning process. So technology is going to play a big role here, right? So when we talk about how it's going to affect us, how it's going to transform the way we learn, clearly there's many more to come. And I'm very sure in the next two presentations, some of these discussions will come up. I must say that in order for us to adapt new technology, there are few outcomes that we should expect. And in some of the questions raised in the pre-registration process, this has been talked about. I'd like to emphasize that the use of technology in learning must firstly save a lot of time to help us to accelerate the whole learning process. Two, it must improve the way learner engage and get to learn more information. It must create an impact. It must be able to produce the performance outcome that we're expecting. Overall, it should reduce operational risk and increase efficiency. And finally, right, to automate, to augment and elevate the whole learning and development process, right? So all these are key, and I encourage it as we start to look at technology and its impact on learning, each of these components, not necessarily all at the same time, but at least 2 or 3 of these components be considered seriously as we adopt how technology can affect us. So I must say that technology must be used and enhance our learning. But to do so, there's 2 very important considerations. One, do we design technology learning system for technology's sake, right? To get it cheaper, faster, and better? Is that the goal that we want to go for? Or do we design learning for a human experience sake, right? Designing learning for user experience such that it is user-friendly, is motivating, and it helps us to discover. Keep in mind that learning must transcend space and time. It is not just a one-off. It's a continuing, ongoing process that we want to adopt learning. And at the end of the day, let me conclude with this one slide. At the end of the day, it is important for us to look at learning to be a component, a part of how we can create new things. We learn because we want to create new things, we want to solve a problem, we want to build new things. It should enable us to do invention, right? To establish new ideas, new concepts of how we move forward. And more importantly, right, it should create the fundamental basis for us to innovate, right? To be able to achieve a widespread use. Hopefully, with the adoption of technology, we can eventually achieve what I call a zero digital divide. Now, if you think very deeply today, education is very divided between the haves and have-nots. But technology should give us that platform to elevate those who have not today, who know not today, to know enough. And we can all have a very strong intellectual discussion. So that's what I have to say. That's my name and contact. If you need to get in touch with me, I'll be happy to look at some of the questions that you raised in the chat. We'll be happy to respond to you accordingly. We can talk more during a panel discussion. Just as a little bonus, having looked at some of the questions that came out, I thought I should just address two things. One is what are the challenges that we face in bringing the future of learning. I think the three key challenges that we see is the resistance to adopt the change. Because of our lack of understanding of technology, we think we do not know, so we do not need to try, and I would discourage that. Right? We need to learn the technology in order to leverage technology to support us. Secondly, is availability of support infrastructure. The availability of support infrastructure is so important to allow us to have ready access and connectivity to information that we need. Ignorance, since it worked before, it worked for the future. I think that mindset needs to change, because with new technology, things will be very different. The jobs of the past will not be there in the jobs of the future, and we need to be prepared for it. Question, let's ask ourselves, what's the purpose of a library, right? I think the role of a library will have changed, and this is something which we should seriously think the implication of this whole concept. And perhaps we will know through the adoption of this technology what the purpose of a technology-driven library will